Hello and welcome back to Park Falls, Wisconsin. We are here at St. Croix headquarters doing our virtual online seminars. So it's a beautiful day, the sun's shining, tons of buzz, tons of people outside. We have in-person seminars going on, and then inside here we have our online virtual seminars with various speakers throughout the day. So this is our second one of the day, more to come in the afternoon, but today we have Steve Heiting with us, manager of Muskie Hunter Magazine, avid muskie angler, and today you're going to be talking to us about catching muskies in a pandemic world. I know a lot has changed, compared to 2 years ago, fishing 2 years ago compared to now. It's a total different world out there, and I'm really excited to see what you have to say with us today. So everybody, welcome Steve, and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. I sincerely hope that this is the only time that I do this seminar, because I'd love to have the pandemic completely behind us. We need this. Our country needs it, Canada needs it, the world needs it, and so hopefully this is a one-time deal. And but the one thing about fishing in a pandemic world, what we saw last year was more pressure from muskie anglers in this area, northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, basically everywhere you could find muskies except in Canada than we've ever seen before, and that's because we couldn't get to Canada. Also saw a tremendous amount of pleasure boat craft. I didn't honestly know until last year that running neon lights all the way down the side of a pontoon boat was a thing. But first time I saw one coming across the lake at night, I was like, I'm not sure what that is. But it turned out to be a pontoon boat with a big old party on, and that's what people do on pontoons, but neon lights. Honestly, didn't know that was a thing until last year, but anyway, I guess it's here now. The one thing that's limiting us to the United States and kind of putting a lot of us on the water all at once here in the States is that Canada's closed down to, we can't cross the border. And yesterday, the Canadian government closed the border through July 21st. I'm not real happy about that. I feel very badly for a lot of friends who own resorts in Ontario. They rely on tourism for their business, their livelihood. And I hope their government comes up with a better plan for dealing with things. But thousands of us go to Canada every year. And, when you look at a map of, say, Lake of the Woods, and most Canadian muskie waters are completely within Ontario. And you look at a map of Lake of the Woods, well, there's a large portion of Lake of the Woods is in the United States. But whoever designed that map, whoever was working on that map, I think the guy from the United States is probably a walleye fisherman, because it's largely Big Traverse Bay, and that's about it. And all the good muskie stuff was probably picked out by a guy in Canada who fished muskies, because all the good stuff is on the Canadian side, and you cannot cross, into Canadian waters. You have to stay on the U.S. side of the waters when you're fishing there. So it's a very, very limited area. And I tried it last year. There were a lot of boats there. We were playing musical spots, for the time I was there, and I'm not going back this year to do it. I'm hoping for that border to open up, in July. Also, Lake St. Clair is a fabulous fishery. If you haven't heard of Lake St. Clair, you really ought to go. But 2/3 of that is in Ontario too. And there were charter captains this year taking out walleye anglers who tried to cross the border, trying to push the envelope a little bit, and everybody in the boat ended up getting fined $800. So that's kind of a deterrent. And so, everybody who wants to go to Lake St. Clair, we're again limited to 1/3 of the lake if you're coming from the States. So what do you got to do to catch muskies in a pandemic world? You got to fish differently. And that's what I want to, impress upon you here today. And I want you to think about stepping outside of your comfort zone. You want to go exploring. You want to think about downsizing your baits. Use different baits, for that matter, than what is conventionally being used. I want you to consider fishing open water, whether you cast it or troll it. And I know trolling isn't yet fully accepted in northern Wisconsin, but if you want to fish open water, it can be very beneficial. And then fish at different times than the masses, because not all the muskies are going to bite during the day. That 8 o'clock to 4 p.m. shift that a lot of us like to fish in some places or whatever. There's a lot of other people fishing at those times, so fish at different times. So what I mean by going exploring is that muskies really like to cross borders too. And what I mean by that is, if you have a lake that has muskies in it, and there's a lake nearby, and there's a stream connecting the two, and even if the DNR does not say that The second lake has muskies in it. If it's connected with a stream to a lake with muskies in it, I guarantee you there are muskies in that second lake. Absolutely guaranteed. And it's the same thing if you're in southern, the southern states and you got a reservoir there. A lot of the people, the game and fish people have to put a barrier or some kind of a fence by the dams to keep muskies within the reservoirs in the southern reservoirs, because they want to go through the dam and go downstream. It's just what they do. If muskies evolved as river fish, they want to swim. But so, in exploring, what I mean is just, if you got this lake that you normally fish and it's connected by a small stream, and that stream's normally kind of low most of the season, but then in the springtime you got high water because of snow melt off, I guarantee you the next lake or all the lakes that are connected to it in some way are going to have muskies in them. And go exploring, check those lakes out. If you can get on them, try them, and you can have muskie fishing. That can be very, very good. Even in this day and age, on opening weekend of muskie season, here in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, that was 3 weeks ago. Two buddies and I, we got our band back together. We used to fish the opener together all the time. And then one guy got busy with the school board in his hometown, and the other guy moved away, to about four hours away. We got the band back together for opening weekend, and we just had fun. I said, let's go do some exploring. We took bratwurst and a grill to do the shore lunch and everything. We just had a blast. But what really made the trip was we were exploring water that we hadn't fished before, and we caught a pile of muskies. I'm not telling you the lake where it caught them, because that's what's cool about exploring is you can find waters that have muskies in them that most people don't know about, and that's all. That all ties into what we're talking about here in this seminar. So another thing you want to do is to try downsizing. That's a tournament tactic. And why is it a tournament tactic? Well, you're going with something that will appeal to more muskies when there's a lot of fishing pressure. Well, we got a lot of fishing pressure in a pandemic world. So in a sense, you're fishing in kind of like a tournament. And so downsizing is a great way of catching fish. Whether, if you want to throw cowgirls, try considering a Mepps Muskie Flashaboo. If you want to throw that 7-9 like everybody's throwing now, or a 10-9 or whatever the latest bucktail is, try downsizing. A Mepps Muskie Killer, Muskie Marabou can be phenomenal. They're smaller, just different, and that can catch a lot of fish. If everybody is fishing fat bastards, and don't blame me for the name, go to lakexlures.com if you want to complain. I'm just repeating a name here of a very popular and very good topwater. If people are catching fish on that, and that's all everybody's throwing, you can go with a top raider. You can go with I was using a globe last year and catching muskies on it, and a lot of the muskies nowadays probably have never seen a globe or rarely have seen a globe. And let me tell you, that globe worked just great last year. Big crankbaits, if you're catching them on, if everybody else is throwing big crankbaits, big rubber, just downsize. Go with something smaller. You appeal to more fish, and especially a pressured fish might be one that's going to bite for you. And then one thing you want to do too, as you are downsizing, one thing, a big, strong consideration here is to, consider the leaders that you're putting in front of them. Because if you put a big, bulky, heavy leader, like a big, heavy wire leader, 12-inch, 13-inch wire leader, or fluorocarbon leader in front of a 5-inch minnow bait, that bait is going to rise. When you twitch them, you twitch a minnow bait like you're twitching a Rapala for bass. Everybody's done that. Twitch a grandma bait, a jake, a baby shallow raider, a slammer. For muskies, it's that 6 or 7-inch size is just a deadly pattern, but you're twitching it. It's twitch, 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 pause, and the muskies hit on the pause. But if the bait is rising with its nose down, as opposed to more horizontal, it's going to get hit less. It's not as natural. And so going with a lighter weight leader, I worked with Stealth Tackle a couple years ago on developing a very high quality twitch bait leader. It very much minimizes the weight in front of the bait, and it's very durable. It's all high quality components. If a fish takes a small bait like this, your leader might get mangled. You may have to replace the leader, but so what? You caught the fish, because the leader is not going to fail because of the components. So consider that as you downsize. Get those Stealth twitch bait leaders. That's what John calls them. Just terrific thing that we worked on there. Something else I think you should consider, and this is working already great for me this year, is fishing open water. And, when I've spoken open water, I often get people saying, well, they don't bite in open water by me. You know, all we got is perch and suckers in the lake. Every single lake I have ever fished has an open water bite of some sort. You know, please understand that. Cisco's in the lake make the open water bite more consistent, but you can still catch them in open water if there's perch, suckers, you know, crappies, bluegills, whatever the muskies are feeding on. If they're in deep water at some point, the muskie's going to be right there with them. A lake by Rhinelander that's only 19 feet deep, and I'd fish it more often if it were closer, but I got to drive by a lot of good water to get to it. But I discovered an open water pattern there, 19 feet of water. All I did, I wasn't catching anything in the weeds, and I went and I saw a bunch of boats catching perch. So I went and fished by the guys catching perch. I kind of circled around the perimeter. I didn't crowd them or anything, and caught a bunch of muskies. And yeah, and that just kind of reinforced it for me. So anytime that you see bait fish over deeper water, like 20 feet or more, and it doesn't have to be 20 feet, like I said in that example, you know, lake's only 19 feet deep. It's all relative to the lake. If it's deeper water and you see bait fish or you mark muskies on your screen, I stop and fish them because I know I can probably catch something there, you know, as long as something's out there. Always remember the most active and catchable muskies are going to be within 15 feet of the surface. And that's one kick of their tail to get to the bait. You know, so you don't want to fish below them. You don't need to run, you know, if you're fishing in 40 feet of water, you don't have to fish your bait down 40 feet down. You have to have it up in the top 15 feet to catch most of your fish. And usually 3, 4, 5 feet is all the deeper it needs to run. Muskies may be relating to structure too, but yes, still be suspended. If there's a lot of pressure on a weed bed and the muskies, you know, say the weed edge is at 8 feet and there's a lot of pressure, they're seeing a lot of baits, or maybe, you know, the powerboat traffic is buzzing over the weed bed, those muskies will swim out, but they won't follow the contour of the lake down into deeper water. They'll just swim right out at the same depth, and they'll be at 8 feet. And so often they're only a cast or two length away from the structure. So that's something to check out. You know, always watch other fishermen, watch your side electronics, you know, your side imaging, because that can tip you off to open water bite. You know, the Cisco's have been just phenomenal in some of the lakes I've been fishing this year. Very up high, the muskies have been packed in around them. It's been a very good fishing season. If you're looking, say you're going onto a lake and you've never before fished it for muskies, or you haven't been there this year, and you want to fish for open water, look to the windy side of the lake, because especially if it's been, you know, the same wind for the last 2 or 3 days, because the wind will push plankton to the windy side of the lake. Smaller fish follow the plankton. You know, next size up, like the crappies or whatever, they follow the smaller fish, and the muskies will be right with them. So the windy side of the lake usually has a better chance of contacting open water fish. So one thing also to consider is evening is almost always good for open water fishing, because the bait fish tend to move up and the muskies will come with them. So watch your electronics. Side imaging is hugely advantageous to you now. Especially the new Gen 4 from Humminbird has been fantastic. You know, the new Gen 4, you can if you mark a muskie on your screen, you can zoom in on it, and the unit will actually tell you how deep that fish is and how many feet away it is from the boat. Now, that may seem, you know, yes, it does create a spot and stalk situation. If you spot a muskie, yes, you can go back and catch them, and I've done it many times in the last couple of years. It may seem like it's too easy, or makes it too easy, or maybe it's unfair. Well, the muskie's still in control. He or she still has to bite, and you still have to make it bite, and often they don't. You know, you make a circle around it now when you first see it. You mark, you know, you got a waypoint on it. You come back an hour later, or at moon time, or at dark, or whatever, and you still got to make them bite. And sometimes they just don't. They're muskies being muskies. And of course, with muskie fishermen, you know, we catch it, we put it back. You know, so I'm not too worried about it being, you know, making it too easy, because we're talking muskie fishing here. Nothing is too easy. If you want to catch a big fish in northern Wisconsin, you know, the biggest fish I catch every single year comes out of open water, and just some really nice fish. When you're fishing open water, you want to make your bait stand out. And what I mean by that is either, you know, if you're fishing around Cisco's, I often use perch colored baits, just because it looks different. Just the color alone right there looks different. You can go larger than the Cisco's, the predominant, because some lakes have got smaller Cisco's than other lakes. You can go larger than the predominant size, smaller. Now it's standing out because it's different. You can rip your baits, twitch them, whatever, make it look different in the water. That's how you make them stand out. That muskie might be down there and he's looking up and he's got 1,000 Cisco's over his head, but your bait comes limping through as you're twitching and ripping it through. Makes it stand out. So should you cast or troll to open water muskies? Well, it's a great question, and I base it on what the lake is. If it's a large open basin, with hundreds and perhaps thousands of acres of open water, stuff that's deeper than 20 feet, well, I'm going to troll. I don't have a captive audience in that situation. If I'm going to cast, typically I'm going to have small constricted areas, just a small area as opposed to that big open basin. Just where there's open. If I'm going over deeper water and the lake only has, say, 200 acres of 35 feet in deeper water, and I'm seeing bait fish there, I'm going to stop and fish it, and I'm going to cast. Trolling in 150, 200 acres is, you're going around in circles. That's kind of a waste of time there, but you can cast the heck out of it, and in the course of 3 or 4 hours, every fish that's out there is going to see your bait. That's what I mean by a captive audience. So that's how I decide whether I'm going to cast or troll. I understand that trolling is not fully embraced here in northern Wisconsin, but with a 1 line per angler, 3 lines max per boat in most of northern Wisconsin, people are seeing that it's not the end of the world as some people predicted it would be. Couple trolling tools you should have, because you want to replicate things to be consistently catching muskies when you're trolling. And what I mean by that is the depth that your bait is running can be hugely important. Say if you want to get you got a 10-inch jake behind the boat or a 10-inch slammer, and you want to get it down to that 6 to 8 foot zone, well, you're going to have to run it back about 40 feet to do so. And in order to consistently send it back, 40 feet, you can count the number of passes on a reel. You don't need to have trolling gear, but it really helps. And the line counter reel can really make it consistent going back, from fish to fish. A trolling rod with fiberglass in it is very helpful. St. Croix's 8-foot Premier glass rod in the Muskie series is a tremendous trolling rod. Also great with live bait in the fall. The Muskie Mojo trolling series is phenomenal too, and you might want to consider that. My trolling rods I don't have one that's shorter than 7.5 foot, and I don't have one that's longer than 8.5. The longer rods are your board rods. If you're going to have a planer board on them, you want your line to stay out of the water, going back to the planer board. Otherwise, the planer board is going to dive in the water. You don't want that. The shorter rods make it a little easier to tip the tips down in the water to catch any floating debris so it doesn't slide down the line to your bait. So planer boards help. They spread they give you a wider spread. But also, if you go over the top of a muskie with your boat, it spooks. It may slide out to the side, well, all of a sudden there's a lure right there, and they grab on. So planer boards are very important too. So it doesn't take much to troll. Rod holders, of course, matter too. I forgot to mention that. Key times are huge right now. You need to be there when the muskies are biting. What a lot of guides did last year, in 2020, we saw in northern Wisconsin, we saw more anglers than we've ever seen on our waters at one time. It just was sometimes crazy. And what a lot of guides switched to was a dawn patrol type thing. And they were out there at the crack of dawn, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd sooner be watching the inside of my eyelids at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's what the guides were doing. They'd fish from like 4 till 9 or 4 to 10 till when the lake started getting crazy. Then they'd pull out and they'd meet up with their people again in the evening and fish till dark. They'd have a split shift type thing rather than the standard 8 to 4 program. And they were catching a lot of muskies, especially early in the morning, because those fish that were bothered by the fishing pressure, the boating pressure, well, now they had a quiet evening to get back to normal. And all of a sudden, here comes a lure coming by, and they were biting them. The guides were doing very well with that last year. I love night fishing. I used to do a lot of night fishing 20 years ago, and then I kind of got out of it a little bit. And I was back doing it last year. And when you're out and there's only 1 or 2 boats on the lake, you got almost the whole lake to yourself, and you're fishing down a weed edge with a crankbait, and you're so tuned into that wobble of the crankbait, and then a muskie comes up and grabs it. there's just nothing better. You get so tuned into what you're doing, and then all of a sudden the muskie just comes up and crushes it. And I've always said that every muskie at night is a 30-pounder until proven otherwise. And what I mean by that is, until you can get your headlamp on, you can get the fish to the surface and you can see what it is, it's all exciting. And it's still exciting when you get the light on, but when you're fighting with something out in the night, you can't see it, but it's pulling hard and water's flying out there and you can't see that, it's a rush. And then you get the headlamp on, okay, it's less of a rush, but you have to do that anyways to net the fish. But like I said, everyone's a 30-pounder till you see it and prove it otherwise. And I just had a blast night fishing last year, and it was very good. There weren't that many anglers on the water after dark. Something else that's hugely important is knowing the times the fish are going to bite. And what I mean by that is if you aren't paying attention to the moon times, you really ought to. I'm not going to pass judgment, but you really ought to. The fish don't know that the moon affects them, but my wife's a teacher. She tells me the kids go crazy in a full moon. My dad was a cop. People go crazy in a full moon. You talk to a nurse. The emergency room's full of people during a full moon. It affects us too. I've seen it affect muskies, northern pike, walleyes, crappies, smallmouth bass, all predators. I'm also a very avid hunter. I hunt, deer, turkeys. I've hunted moose, and I've seen the moon affect all of that too. They don't know it's affecting them. It just does. Weather changes are also very important, to pay attention to. And I can't illustrate it here in this virtual seminar, but the weather change is often, if you look at the sky and you see kind of like a herringbone style in the cloud or shape in the clouds, and they're kind of starting to build out of the west. Well, sailors call that a mackerel sky. And that's a precursor to a storm. And what that means is that within the next 24 hours, you will have a storm. So you get those wiggly clouds up there, and they kind of start coming across. And that's the start typically of the front's passage. That's the start of when the fish are going to start to feed. I don't know why they feed better ahead of a storm than after, or after the front passes. They just do. Do they feed ahead of it and then they're full so they don't have to feed afterward? I don't know. Maybe the pressure change affects their swim bladder. Maybe that bothers them. Until we can interview a muskie, we'll never know. But the important thing is when you start to see that herringbone pattern in the sky, that's when you got to get really serious about your fishing. Because as the sky starts to fill in with clouds and turns white, the fishing will get really good. And then it starts getting darker, and you'll catch fish all the way up through that. They'll be very active typically in that. A couple years ago, I did an article for Muskie Hunter about the passage of storm fronts. And as I was doing that article, I was looking for photos of muskies, big muskies, caught in a driving rainstorm. And I couldn't find anything bigger than 45 inches, believe it or not. I had all kinds of them before, all kinds of them after. But in that driving downpour, I didn't have them. So what that tells me is you can still catch them in a driving downpour. They're just not going to be as big. But immediately after is very good too. And that's typically that front as it's passing then will still offer good fishing until you start to see the clouds start breaking up. All of a sudden, it's been cloudy for the last 2 or 3 days, and all of a sudden you get flashes of blue through the clouds and the edges of the clouds get wispy. Well, that's the start of a tough period. The front is passing, the pressure is rising. So, pay attention to the environment, because it can really tip you off. And if you want to follow this, if you don't want to watch the sky or you're trying to plan a trip, 2 apps I use on my smartphone are iSalooner, which is $4.95 for a perpetual license. I mean, you buy it, you got it the rest of your life. You might as well use it. And it's got all the moonrise, moonset, moon overhead, moon underfoot times, sunrise, sunset times. It's all right there. You can tailor it for where you're at, meaning your location. And also, it has a little rating system on top so far as whether the fishing is going to be good. It's like 4 stars. You can have bass there, but being a muskie fisherman, you can tailor it also to muskies. I've got it, tailored for mine with that. Like I said, $4.95, you got it the rest of your life. And I consult it every day. I go hunting and fishing. It's some of the best $5 I ever spent in my life. I use the Muskie Hunter TV app. And this ties in, it has all the moon stuff, but then it also ties into the local weather station. So you can check, you can check barometric pressure and that, and it gives you, it has a muskie activity meter, and it tells you what it expects the fish to be doing. Can be very good. It once predicted a 53 incher for me a couple years ago. I was doing a seminar about predicting, muskie activity, kind of similar to what I'm doing in a very short period here. And the individual who was watching it, he asked about the Muskie Hunter, TV app. I said, I use it a lot. Well, he pulls it out and he starts talking about it, and all of a sudden it goes bing, and he says, it gave him a push notification that muskie activity level was going to be like 20 in 20 minutes. And I said, well, we were at Lake of the Woods where I was doing the seminar, and I said, I got nothing better than that. Let's get out there and fish. And 20 minutes later, I was holding a 53 incher for photos. So that's a very, very cool app. Best part about it even is it's free. So why not have it? So that's the ways you can keep track of what the fish are going to do. The moon always the weather always trumps the moon. And I'm not getting political here by saying Trump, don't get on my case about that. But weather always is a bigger factor. But you can plan for the moon. You can't plan for the weather. Weather, you don't know until 2, 3, 4 days ahead of time what it's going to do. Sometimes I contend that the weather guys on TV don't know the next day what it's going to do. You all know that. So if you got the weather and it's good, and you got a good moon in your back pocket because you plan to be there when the moon is doing its thing, that's how you catch a lot of fish in this situation. So that's my seminar. Those are the things I am doing. I did last year. I'm doing again this year in the face of lots and lots of anglers. And I hope you enjoyed it, and good fishing. And if you haven't been to St. Croix's Customer Appreciation Day, you really got to come. There's thousands of people here. There's special deals. There's seminars. There's brats. I'm going to go get one myself. My stomach's telling me I'm hungry right now. So you really ought to come out. And like I said, hopefully this is the last time we talk about a pandemic. Good fishing.
Thank you, Steve. One quick. We had a quick question from the audience. What leader do you use with topwater?
It depends on the bait. I like to use that Stealth twitch bait leader because it just minimizes all the weight in front of the topwater. Typically, a topwater runs better if its nose isn't down in the water. Sure. So that minimizes the weight. With a walk the dog topwater like a Jackpot or a Dancing Raider or a Weagle, then I'm going to use a jerkbait leader stiff wire because it cuts the water much better. But it's important there to go swivel less, not to have a swivel on the front. And you can use one with a swivel, that will all work. But the swivel will take away one part of the leader where it may get hung up, and it'll minimize your fouled cast.
Awesome. Great information. Thank you very much. And awesome info. We look forward to seeing you at our next online virtual seminar at 11:45 Central Time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.